Hey everyone, you're listening to the Tea with Tanya podcast, and I'm your host, Tanya Ambrose. I'm a public health professional by day and your average tea-loving millennial and content creator by night. My goal for this podcast is to share public health stories, self-love and wellness tips, to educate and empower, and to promote positive living. This podcast is here to serve you. Join me in the tea tasting room to see what I have brewing for you. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Tea with Tanya podcast, and I'm very excited for today's episode because I have two very special guests. They have made an impact on my life in some way, shape, or form. It's like a full circle moment for me because, I was a little girl growing up, watching these two people, and here I am in their presence and have the opportunity to interview them. So we're going to welcome Mr. Glenville Gregory and Mr. Jeremy Francis to the Tea with Tanya podcast, and of course, I'm going to let them tell us a little bit about themselves. But we'll start with Mr. Gregory since he's our senior. He'll be the one to tell us about himself first. So go right ahead.
Hello, good day. I'm very happy to be part of this podcast today. Joining two persons, as Tanya mentioned before, who I had interaction with when they were much younger. So I'm just happy that that you are here today as we do this together. My name is Glenville Gregory, and I am a pastor. I pastored in the Moravian Church for a number of years. As a matter of fact, I think I mentioned just some time ago that I have been ordained for over 35 years. So that's a long time, but I have been in ministry for that long. I am a retired U.S. Army chaplain where I served for 15 years. And was retired after I had some injuries. So I'm medically retired at this time. What am I doing now? Well, I am still participating in church life, where with the Reformed Episcopal Church, I conduct services from time to time. In particular, recently during the pandemic, I have been assisting with services twice per month, and that service also is found on YouTube. So I'm just happy, basically, to be here with you today.
Mr. Jeremy Francis.
Hi, I am Jeremy Francis. Incidentally, Reverend Gregory was my pastor growing up. Confirm me. At Cana, I'm from St. Croix, but I grew up in Antigua in the Cana Moravian Church, where I knew Reverend Gregory was my pastor, and I knew Tanya since before Tanya existed. And then I knew her when she was knowing her dad. I have been a pastor for the last 19 years, 18 years ordained, pastoring for 19 years. I've pastored all over the Caribbean. I spent some time in Trinidad, in Barbados, in St. Kitts, Antigua. Now I am in St. Croix. I am father of one, and happy to say that I'm expecting one more. My wife and I are having a baby.
Yes.
And I'm an avid reader. I'm an avid musician. Play music in my spare time for fun. And Sunday mornings, I still play, even though I pastor now, I still play for church as well. Sunday mornings at 8 o'clock. So on every given Sunday, I do two services. I pray for one and then I preach at the other. And that's about it. It's good to be here. It's good to see you. It's good to see you, Tanya. We're proud of you. Like the stuff that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And when I said full circle, Mr. Gregory, he christened me when I was a baby before I even knew myself. He also happens to be the father of my dear beloved best friend. And Jeremy here, like I would have said before, he's my favorite pianist. I guess he didn't know this before, but when his fingers just flow so smoothly. I don't know how he does it, but he's just so great. So if I had to pick up any pianist in the entire world, in the world of the Alicia Keys and the Stevie Wonders, he really and truly, guys, he would be my favorite. And he just so happens to be my godmother as well. His beautiful mom is my godmother. So, it's a full circle moment here. Well, we're going to get straight into today's topic. We're talking about religion or Christianity in today's society. So tell me what got you, because once say you've been a pastor, you've been in the field for over 30-something years, Jeremy, you're almost 20. What led you to ministry? Why not something else? Jeremy, you're good at music. Why not in a band somewhere touring the world? What led you guys into being of service or ministry to the masses?
But I think I was born into it. I didn't go anywhere else. I went to church. Church was where I went, and church was what I did. And so church was everything. But along the way, my mother always instilled the whole notion of not just being in church, but making sure you have a relationship with God and finding joy and serving people out of the goodness of their heart. And then when I was a teenager and started to sense the whole hearing about a call to ministry, and it was in Reverend Gregory's living room at the Gracehill Manse that I eventually lived in years later, that I went and sat down and started to work through and ask and question and struggle through the whole idea of ministry and what it means to be called and what you do. And to be honest with you, I thank God for him because he has not given me up since. Every step of it, I would be in college in Jamaica, and my mother would say to me, "Oh, Reverend Gregory, pass by and ask you." So he has not given me up, and I think that's what led me. And also, I remember when I was 6 years old, my then pastor here in St. Croix, his wife walked up to me one day and said, "You're going to be a pastor one day." And I went home to put on my bathrobe and began to mimic what he did in church. And I think it just started from that. I've tried to walk away from it. I mean, I'm going to tell you, in 20 years, 19 years, I've tried to walk away. Every time I try to walk away from it, something put me right back. And it's like when you come back, you just can't seem to get rid of it again. So that's just where I'm at. So,
Mr. Gregory?
Yeah, for me, basically, I grew up in the church, and so I would, in general terms, say that it's my community of faith who saw the call. Let me put it this way, and interpreted that call until I was at the stage that I could, because I grew up with my grandmother in Swetes, and it was a lot of praying. It was a lot of listening to gospel music. It was a lot of listening to a lot of preachers. It was a lot of listening to Little Lighthouse Club and Uncle Charlie and all these kind of things on these gospel radio stations. That was just my influence.
Yes, very Paradise.
You just couldn't do anything else. And so she literally monitored my spiritual life, my spiritual development. And then I always remember my godmother, Cora Simon, teaching me at Cana Sunday school. Remember thy creator now in the days of thy youth, and teach me thy ways, O Lord, so that I may walk in thy truth. And these two passages, I remember her teaching us as the golden text. And somehow those captured my heart from a very young age. And so while growing up at Cana, Olivia Warner, she was very instrumental. She impressed upon me. She was also one of the leaders, along with Sister Yvette, at KDS. And she impressed upon me very early that you're going to be a pastor, and you're going to come back here, and you're going to be my pastor. And it happened. When I returned to Cana, she cried because she remembered saying those words to me. When I went to St. Thomas, when I migrated, Reverend Dr. Charles Peters at Niski literally took me under his arms and molded me and fashioned me because he saw something that I didn't see or something that I was resisting. And the Niski congregation also took me and helped me through until I was at the stage where I met Bishop Brown, who basically just told me, hey, this is it. This is what God is calling you to do. And so I surrendered. So I went into seminary. I was 18, 19. When I went into seminary, in Jamaica, I was a young chap. Basically,
20.
when I went, so very young. But along the way, there were persons who saw something that I didn't see or something that I was ignoring. Because my father always wanted me, Edmund Gregory, God rest his soul in peace, always said to me that you're supposed to be a doctor. That's what he wanted. For me, I just wanted to finish school.
All right.
But that's my story in a nutshell.
Interesting. And I do want to ask, as a, I guess, we'll consider me a millennial because I can't believe I'm even saying that today. But one of the conversations that often come up with me and my friends is that, it seems that the church would have lost their grip on young people in the church. Why do you think, or what do you think led to this? And how can the church go about bringing back that element of bringing back the youth or young people into today's church? Because, growing up for me, we met friends at church. We went to different groups, dance group or the KDS. of the churches. And now, even when I would go back home to Antigua, I was that, the young people are not as active in the church anymore. So what can we do to bring that element back? Because again, the church, I feel like is how should I put it? That star of our society. So how can we go back to making sure that our youths are much more active or more willing to be or express their faith?
I think the word for me is journeying. I think when we were growing up, we had people in the congregations who journeyed with us through everything, whether we were on the right side or on the wrong side. Growing up at Cana, you can talk about Teacher Ruth, who journeyed with you in many ways. Whether you like it or not, she said it and she said it in love, she said it in anger and then in love, that order. And then you had teacher Yvette, Sunday school to me, who was always there. But I think the idea is that we need to begin to journey with our young people again. I think we've lost that because in some ways you can't talk to them. When I was growing up, if a report went home to my mother about anything that happened at church, there was no question asked. Once the report came, you were automatically wrong, period. And I think we've lost that sense now where you can't talk to people, you can't talk to people's children. So it kind of makes it difficult to journey with them. But I think it becomes important for us to journey with people and journey with our young people again. As they walk through critical phases of life, your teenage years are crazy times. And it's really important to help somebody to help you work through your thoughts and your emotions and your feelings. So for me, it's a whole idea of journeying and journeying through life and life's issues at that stage.
I endorse, what my brother just mentioned, because the whole idea of having somebody to be there with you, walking with you, through good or bad, whether through pain or what have you, is important. I would add to what he has just mentioned, the whole idea that we're living in what is described as a postmodern world, or some people would say a post-Christian world. And basically, what that simply means that Christianity is not the dominant religion anymore, so to speak. And there's so many other powerful things are out there, so many other belief systems which rival Christianity. So all these things influence our young people. I know that I've seen a study that talks about that most Gen Zs, they say, are atheists. But I know that what for me was more significant, the study also mentioned that in terms of Gen Z, that they're the most irreligious grouping now because they're raised by persons who do not necessarily subscribe to any particular religious beliefs. And so those kind of things are influencing our young people. And so church is not really a significant thing in the life of some people. And then you have the situation too, where millennials, are really into the computers, into the cell phone. Most of the news that you get is on your cell phone, on your computer.
And on Facebook or Twitter.
Exactly. So all your communication is there. And so we find that the church, however, isn't really there in a big way. And so all these other platforms which are there, that they're dominated by other things. So you don't find the church alone there. So persons have choices in terms of what they listen to. And then something that your good friend Rena shared with me some time ago, we were thinking about how they influence your mind, the algorithm stuff.
Yes.
And so they know what you look at. They know the kind of interest, and they plan things to suit that. And so it's not necessarily the church. So there's so many other influences that our young people have. And so I think that's what's pulling them away. So a solution that I see that I would say, like Reverend Jeremy, having his congregation of about 500 people, it's hard for him to basically minister meaningfully to all these people. And so one of the things that I think the church might be able to do is to have something that I know the Moravian Church was looking at many years ago, where team ministry. Team ministry is real and it is something, but it's not just to have team ministry, but it is to have persons who are specialized. Because you can't just pull up somebody and just say, I'm going to drop them in that team. You have to understand the dynamics of a particular congregation and place the right persons within it. You can't just say, oh, the person is called to ministry and therefore we are sending them there. Congregational dynamics are important for team ministry to work. Understanding the dynamics for team ministry to work, to bring all this so you can minister adequately and meaningfully to these folks.
I know that is true, because the church that I go here now, I guess it would be considered a mega church, but the way in which, of course, they have their funds, let's be real about that too, but they do have different programs that's catered to, like the Gen Zs or the millennials and even the older population. So, again, being a church that big, and you still get that sense of community in a sense where, the pastor may not even know you by your name, but then you have these different subgroups in the church where you can go have that Bible study there or, have a little concert that I was exposed to. And I was like, wow, when I thought about it, I was like, this is something we can do, back in the Caribbean in a sense to make learning about Christ or make being a Christian fun, if that makes sense. Instead of just, come and read the Bible.
Relative.
If you read the Bible, if you're going to read the Bible, that's the only way. Make it relative, as you say, and that way it does make it more interesting for us to want to come back to church or for us to stay in the church. Because you can still be, I think I want you guys to answer this, because, I feel like for me, I'm thinking, let me have one foot in the door, the other foot out, because, you don't want to miss. Like, you feel like you're going to miss out something if you just go all in. I hope I'm saying it the right way. So how can we, as young people, you can be a Christian, but you can still have fun. You can still have a life. Like, how can we manage or balance that being faith-based, but still you want to enjoy a movie that may have in a curse word, or you want to, because I feel like some of us, or for me, again, personally, back in the day, or if I watch a movie and it had in like a curse word, I feel like I was committing a sin, or, it was just like so bad. So how can we be ourselves, but you can still be a Christian and still have fun out here in today's world? Because everything is so, you judge your, people have something to say, which you just being, living your normal life. So what can we do as far as that?
I think in your younger journey, you have to be a bit more selective about what you put in. But as you mature in your faith, as you mature in Christ, as you mature in your own life, then you know what some of your own triggers are. So you can't deal with certain things. As much music as I like, I can't take dance hall because things that are going on in dance, I can't take it. I can't. So I can listen to a lot of other stuff, but you see dance hall and rock and roll, I draw the line right there. So can't handle that. But I think you have to know yourself to know what your triggers are and to know, but I can't deal with this, or I can't deal with this. So there's too much of this and there's not, so I can take in this and not take in this.
And that's okay.
And I think, just to piggyback back up a bit, I think too, I get the issue because I passed up, my other congregation was multi-generation. I came here, this congregation is basically almost bi-generational. Either you're old or you're middle-aged. The young are gone, but the old, so I have people in the chat, the pandemic exposed this, can't deal with tablet, can't deal with Facebook, not dealing with YouTube, not dealing with PayPal and Zelle and Giveify and Cash App and all these kind of things. So it's how do you know?
Right.
And to be honest with you, sometimes it is difficult as one pastor to do all of that stuff. And some things just get lost by the way. But on the topic is, again, it's knowing yourself. So that's where I would.
Okay. What I would add to that is that it's understanding that Christianity is a way of life. It is much more than just a philosophy that you're adhering to. And it's not just a religion of do's and don'ts. Because I think sometimes that's how it's communicated. So every time you're Christian, well, people start to think, well, you don't do this, you don't. Maybe we need to change it and say, as a Christian, these are the things that I do.
Mm-hmm.
So now people know what you are about rather than what you're not about. So I really think that might be a way for a young person to very early to know, hey, as a Christian, this is how you live. Give it a positive, because I have to admit, when I grew up as a young Christian, man, all what I hear about is what I should do. So now, anytime you're going to do anything, you start to think, oh my God, if anybody know that I do this, I'm going to be punished. I'm going to be condemned. I'm going to be shamed. But if I begin to communicate to you, hey, you know what? Yes, you can enjoy music. Yes, but there's some lyrics that don't glorify God. So be on the lookout for those things and do not become entrapped in them. What a
Right.
positive message than to say to you, now listen to no reggae. Like my grandmother used to say, don't listen to Benna.
Benna.
And that was, that was the end of the story. Don't listen to Benna. Exactly. No Quail Bay. You know what I mean?
And so, you can't even question why, because it's just
right.
Don't. There's no why.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe that's why I like Calypso so much, because she said, don't do it. So because I want to know what it is that I'm missing out on.
What you're missing out.
Yeah. So why not tell me about the good things that can be achieved through it, but then also teach me along the way, as using Jeremy's term, as you journey with me, teach me that there will be some pitfalls. Hey, you got to learn how to identify them. And these are some of the methods that you use. That's what I would say.
Because I remember growing up in the church. I think I forgot who it was I asked. They were like, you can listen to music. It's just what the message is saying. So from the minute they told me that, I said, okay, you know what? So I pick and choose, because for me, I'm part of the millennial, but the dance hall and these things, I can't even tell you what is the latest song, because it's just like Jeremy's. It's just not for me. I'm more of an old school, into the old school R&B or the old school reggae. Like, the Bob Marleys. Like, I'm just that old of a sort when it comes to my music. But yeah, because they try to make sure that whatever that music or even the movie saying or preaching is something positive. Granted, some TV shows you just can't help but to indulge and watching them, but so that is
raunchy. All right, we get it.
Yeah, it's just knowing your limit, like Jeremy, I think, is trying to say.
Yeah. So we live in a world where morality is fluid. You understand? Truth is fluid. Your truth might not be my truth, and the truth of God doesn't really matter to some folks. And so it's what I believe, what I want to believe. And ethics and all that kind of things seem to be impacted. And then how have we done it in more recent? We talk about the millennials, and then we talk about Generation X, and now we have the Gen Zs. And I think that the church has not really made the conscious effort to understand these distinctive groups. And so because of that, we find now that we're still in the one size fit all.
Yes.
In truth and in fact, it now is calling us as a church to have, I would say, multi-generational style ministries. So to have Reverend Jeremy, pastor of a church with 500 folks, and I'm just pulling a figure out, I'm not sure the size of your congregation, it's impossible for him, because all he's actually doing is burning himself out, trying to minister persons who are like my godmother, who is in her 70s. And you have a group like that, and then you have a next group, and you have a next, and everybody is competing for his attention and wanting his needs, and wanting their needs met by this one person. And so I think persons, when they're coming to church, yes, they're coming to hear the gospel preached, but they want it to be communicated in a way that they can get it. And so, like, for example, the millennials are very computer literate. The Gen Zs, a lot of the Gen Zs are atheists, and some of them, what is important to them is that you're a man or woman of your word, no in between. Right. No gray area, it's either this or it's that. So you have all this mixture, and I think that is having an impact on how persons are responding to church nowadays.
And that became, if I can piggyback, that became very evident with the pandemic. I pastor now, I'm coming from a congregation that had a little bit of everybody. What he just described, Grace Hill, I pastored Grace Hill for 4.5 years, and that was Grace Hill. They had a little bit of everybody. But I've come to a congregation now that is filled with a bunch of retirees who are also technophobes. So when the pandemic hit and they could not come to church, the struggle they had was they could not be in church because this Facebook thing, they knew nothing about that. YouTube make it worse. And so it was a struggle for many of them. Thankfully, the church had a radio ministry, and that is what kept many of them going. But without that radio ministry, and even now, they're just not doing that. And so the challenge is, you have on one hand, I have a handful of people in the church saying, "Well, Pastor, why don't you get PayPal so we can give our offerings through PayPal? Because that's the generation they're at. Let's do everything from our phone.
Right,
Let's do
right,
PayPal, let's do Zelle, let's do Givelify and all these other
right.
cash apps. Let's do all this stuff." And then you have another
Push to
generation,
pay.
push pay, yeah. Then you have another person like Sister Cora and others, and then who say, "Pastor, with my envelope, me come bring my envelope at church and put it in the basket," and they're good with that. and as pastor, you find, and then I have another set of, well, a few as they may be, that I can't get into them because they are the generation Z and the generation XYZ element of P, but they are way away from that. Who they, as far as they're concerned, they glad church online because now they can lie down in the bed half asleep, put on the service, and tell you
Yes.
they're in church, and they're good with that. And that becomes a challenge because you're trying to figure out at which point, what do you do to capture all of these people sometimes in one shot, and you can't get it done. So, but the journey is important.
Yes, and I agree with you with the journey because you mentioned the likes of Teacher Ruth and even Teacher Francis, these different people. And even before I migrated to the US here, again, we didn't have, we have a select few before we lost them. We didn't have that, I guess, those people to journey with us. And it just makes me sad to see that, like you said, everybody's trying to play catch up. You have to understand the millennials, the Gen Zs, the Gen X, because there's so many different population. I can't even keep up. So I guess, but what role can the church play? Because I know, many of us, grew up in the church trying to have that moral compass, but what about the bad as far as the church? That I feel like we don't address certain things happen in today's society. Like the church decide, okay, you know what, let's for instance, maybe racism or something else that's a hot topic, because, there's always some hot topic I can't even keep up either. But, it's like the church decide, or they pick and choose which battles they want to fight. When I feel like, growing up, we always said the church was the center of everything, believe in Christ, these different things. But then when there's certain things that I would think, or I'm sure some people that I've seen on social media think the church should take a stance or even talk about, they don't. Why do you think about that? I want to hear Mr. Gregory's opinion for that. Why don't they, instead of picking and choosing, why can't we just come in and try to find a common ground to give people something to believe in and, let them know, we're still ahead in a sense then. There's something you can look forward to.
I don't know if basically that we're going to be able to give people a common ground. What I think that the church has to be careful of is that it does not replicate, so to speak, the culture of the world. And why am I saying that? Because I think dominant among us is a culture that tries to dictate to the church what the gospel should be like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the gospel of Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and it will be the same tomorrow.
Right.
So I think what the church might need to do is to contextualize the gospel. When I say contextualize the gospel, I mean that, so I am here now in the South. And for example, recently our governor talked about stopping the federal monies that were coming to help persons who lost their jobs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a situation where some of these politicians are thinking, people are not going back out to work because, they're getting more money by collecting unemployment, rather than seeing the situation whereby people are not going back out to work because the employers are not paying them a livable wage. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so that's what gospel, to my mind, address that kind of thing, because that's a justice issue now. Mm-hmm. That's a human rights issue. And the gospel talks about fairness. It talks about justice. It talks about how Jesus came for salvation. And salvation is not just a soul thing. It's a life thing. It impacts your entire life. And I think there is where gospel needs to go, rather than the compartmentalization that we try to give it. It's like the other day, I don't know, the situation in Atlanta. I'm talking politics now. There's similar to talk politics.
No, that's fine. Go right ahead. That's why you're here.
But the situation in Atlanta with this voting rights thing.
Oh, yeah.
where the minority leader in the Senate is telling business people, keep out of politics. But the
Yeah.
same business people, money he want for go run for
To go run
politics.
the
Mm-hmm.
politics.
You see what I mean? So it's like church. So here it is now. Church, this is what you do. You just tell people
Stay in your
go,
lane.
go to heaven, stay in your lane, and tell
Right.
them go to heaven. But you know what? Let me abuse them. Let me tell them they're less than people. Let me tell them that you know what? You're black and therefore you have no value in this America, or
Mm-hmm.
that you're Asian and therefore your history, your contribution, we're going to diminish it. You don't address that, church. But no, that's not what gospel is about. Gospel is about the total human. It's about liberation of the total person.
Right.
And so I really think that we cannot compartmentalize. We have to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ in all its fullness.
Okay,
Agreed.
what about you,
Um,
Jhonathan?
I agree. The social justice gospel, social issues gospel. I think part of our problem, and I'm going to talk from the Caribbean perspective. Part of
Okay.
our problem in the Caribbean, though, is, well, and I might probably get in trouble for this, but it's okay. My back broad, very. But part of the problem in the Caribbean is two things. We tend to think that church and gospel must only be about getting people to heaven and not necessarily helping people to live now. So our ministries have been tailored towards catering to the soul, so much so, and the spirit. So we are very good at having crusades and evangelistic services, and we want to have prayer meetings all day, all night. But then when people done pray, they're hungry, we have nothing to feed them. People can't go to school. Children have been home
Mhm.
in this pandemic. We have not sought to provide one house with internet, one house with a computer, one house. So
Right.
practical ways for people to live. And so we have two issues to me in the Caribbean church. One is the fact that we just figure, and maybe it's our politics too, because especially in the Eastern Caribbean, politics is very segmented. So if you talk against the government, you're anti-government, and if you talk against, if
Mm-hmm.
you're opposition. So people shy away from that, and we have been compartmentalized to stay in the soul thing. That's what you're supposed to talk about. But then the problem with that then becomes that the church very often recognizes only one sin. And I find that the church is too preoccupied with people's bedrooms. So when you listen to a lot of people preach, they talk about is who's sleeping with who, same-sex marriages, this and that,
Homosexuality, yeah.
homosexuality, this and that. When homosexuality is one issue, but here in the Virgin Islands, for example, homosexuality is not the issue. We have a problem here in the Virgin Islands where all our men and young boys are being killed.
Right.
Yep.
On St. Croix alone, we have had almost 18 until 19 homicides, and the majority of them have been men for the year. And this is only the 8th day of May. We've already had 19 murders on St. Croix
Wow.
alone, most of it by gun violence. We still have issues of rape and incest going on under the slide, but we ain't talking about that because we're more concerned about two men or two women and people want to get married. We ain't talking about the bosses who like Brother Gregory said, people in them who want you to come to work but pay you next to nothing and expect that you must work. People in them
Mm-hmm.
who make the work environment so toxic, but you are forced to work for that because you can't get nothing else to do, and so you work with. But with the
Yeah.
church, it's not talking about those things. Last night I said to a friend of mine, healthcare. We have a situation here now in the Virgin Islands where healthcare is ridiculously expensive. Ridiculously
Mm.
expensive. Insurance is ridiculously expensive. And so persons are now excluded because in some cases they go home and sit down and wait to die because they can't afford healthcare. But the church don't talk about that.
Yep.
We don't act about that because we're busy trying to
Yeah.
get people to go to heaven, but they're dying now. And so for me,
Yes. And
I
dying
think
without a savior.
I'm dying without a savior. So I think that where the church needs to go in this day is to go to the point where our gospel becomes not just about going to heaven, but our gospel goes to the point where it's saying, well, yeah, we want you to get to heaven, but you need to live good. And this is how we're going to live. And this is how we can assist you to live in such a way that we care for each other. Unfortunately, if it don't hit us in our houses, we don't feel it, so we don't talk about it. So until somebody for me get killed, I ain't got nothing to say about it because your children bad and my children good. That's why my child don't get through. So I stay at my end. But we need to talk about the whole idea of the social element, the social justice, the social rights, the social ethics of the gospel, and bring that to the fore as part of what it means to live a Christian life. Being Christian is not about praying and reading your Bible. It has to be more than that. The community element of Christianity is what we need to really hammer in at this point.
And I'm glad you said that because, not many people would want to admit that. Because, when I first moved here, when I moved back down here to Georgia, I found a church and I was, they were talking about things that I wasn't used to. Because, again, you grew up in the Caribbean, again, we weren't talking about certain topics. It was just like, read the Bible, pray, you get to heaven type of thing. Of course, you learn the different stories in the Bible, don't get me wrong. But some of the things that they were talking about at the church, I was like, wow, I didn't know that was something that, could have been done in church. So I'm really glad you said that because even experiencing that, it made me more comfortable to even wave my hand in church. As long as in Antigua, back in Kenya, you have your hand at your side because you don't want nobody to see, or you're waving too much, or you even move, you swing left and right too much because, it may be something that they look down upon or they may think something, in a sense, negative of you. So I'm really glad you guys touched on that. But I do want to switch a little bit to mental health in the Caribbean again. And I've said this before on this podcast. We're always told, or it's a situation where, go to the pastor for counseling, which, again, we look to men of faith or, women of faith, wherever, if you're a pastor, for guidance. Because that's what we were taught growing up. But I feel like as far as the church, we don't promote, in a sense, mental wellness. Go to the doctor, physical health, we all know, your cholesterol too high, this, that, and the third. But when it comes to our mental health, we kind of like brush it under the rug. Or if somebody says, this particular, because I can only speak from the young people perspective. She's going through X, Y, Z, or he's going through X, Y, Z. They're too young for they go through that. Or what ain't going to happen for them in their mind. So, that kind of thing is always like, we're too young or we shouldn't have these issues really and truly. So how can we bring more awareness or get a conversation going in our church where we can say, it's acceptable for us we can seek guidance from a pastor, yes, but we can also go to a professional, a licensed, professional like a therapist or whatever to help with our mental health because it is important. We're living in a pandemic. Many people have not been outside or have not been working. There's just so many different changes now. But I feel like as a church or some churches, we don't push that conversation that it's okay for you to have a mental illness in a sense where, you're stressed, you're depressed, you're so many different things. So how can we get that conversation going and let us as young people or even people in general realize that it is okay for you to be, not feel your best self, but you can come and speak to, me as a pastor or you can come and speak as a therapist. For me, before you answer, I'll say this. I was one of those people, I confided in the past and then they threw back in my face. So I'm not going to ever go back to a pastor. That's just my, I'm being honest. But for those that, let's say can't afford a therapist, let's be honest, because as you say, healthcare is expensive and not many health insurance, in a sense, would cover a therapy session. So how can we get that conversation or destigmatize therapy or speaking to somebody about your mental health? I know it's long-winded, but I get my point across.
I don't. First of all, don't give up on pastors. We're not all the same. Second of all, some of us, we need to be honest. I did courses in counseling, both undergrad and graduate, but I counsel, but I also know when to stop. And I think many of us as pastors need to be honest with ourselves, to say to persons, I am not the best person to deal with this. And network, have within our arsenal at least 2 or 3 persons that we can point to say, we'll go talk to this person. I will make the contact for you and must not. Because that is important. We need to be, and I have openly said, it is okay to have Jesus and a therapist. It's quite okay. And I think sometimes from the pulpit, we need to endorse. I remember there was a particular issue in my life that I went through. I reached out to Brother Gregory and Glenville pointed me to a particular person who helped me to work through those issues. And it was one of the best things. And since then, I have then pointed somebody else to that same person and said, hey, I had my issue, check him. he will help you sort yourself out. But I think as pastors, sometimes we need to be honest with ourselves and say that we are not equipped to deal with it, and help persons to so be guided, point persons that refer them to. The other side of it, and this might have nothing to do with you, Tanya, but Brother Gray might understand what I'm saying, is that I think sometimes our model for ministry has to change. The one pastor in the congregation who does everything is not going to work. It's not going to work. I can't counsel, I can't do grief counseling, baptismal counseling, marriage counseling, life counseling, still do Bible study, visit the sick. I can't do it all. At some point, something will fall through the crack. Yeah?
Right, that is true.
At some point, something will fall through the crack. And so I can't do it all. But some of us just need to be honest enough to say, this is not my area, but be wise enough to also say, well, I also know this person, to talk with them. And in this day and age of technology, the person does not necessarily have to be on island, on spot. I'm doing marriage counseling now from where I am sitting, where just like this, I log into Zoom or Skype and I have the conversation that way and move on. Because I'm doing that now for a couple in Antigua, and I'm doing that now for a couple in Barbados. So you don't understand that, but you just have to be honest enough with yourself to say, I can go this far, no further. Check him.
Yeah.
You know, I support Brother Jeremy in that, because something that I said before and kind of got in trouble when I had returned to the conference to the province in 2006. I made a general statement. I said, look, you cannot just sit down and read a book and all of a sudden you're a town counselor. It doesn't work like that. For example, one of the things that even when I was in Guantanamo Bay, I'm a trained pastoral counselor, clinically trained, and all that good stuff. So went through all my clinicals, all the hours required. But listen to this. When I was there, I'm chaplain. So my office was here, and the psychologist, her office was like next door. I am not paid to be a psychologist.
Right.
I am not paid to be the counselor. There was also a social worker there. Yes, I have counseling skills. Yes, clinically trained and all that, not biblical counseling, pastoral counseling. And I try to tell people there's a difference between biblical counseling and pastoral counseling.
Very different.
You understand? So there's a whole big difference there too. But again, I knew my lane. Now, if somebody, when I'm out of that context, and then I am sitting, like, I assume the person who I recommended to you, Brother Jeremy, he and I would talk, and I would say, okay, A, B, C, D. And he would say, okay, I want you to take that client. I can work now in that capacity as a therapist. Even when I worked at Seaview in St. Thomas, I worked as a therapist because I'm trained, I'm qualified for that. So I can do that. But as a pastor, when you're in the pulpit, it becomes more difficult for you to do that, Tanya. Why? Because as Brother Jeremy said, you do A, B, C, you don't go to D, you make the referral then. Right. Because you're beginning to, as I normally say to people, you begin to open that person, you begin to break them down. Yep. And you have to be careful that you're not breaking them down to the extent that you cannot put back those pieces together.
Right.
Also, the issues that person might be facing. As pastor, it's not beneficial for you to have that kind of information on the person. Take it from me. The relationship now becomes so uncomfortable. But let me say this to you, though. I support it 110% that we need as a church to take mental health seriously. Yeah. There are too many members in our congregation who have all kind of different issues.
In the pulpit too.
And you're correct. And we have those issues. And what happened? Persons are ashamed because there are stigmas associated with you suffering from depression, with you being stressed out. And so I present this image that I am okay when truth, and in fact, when I go home, I don't want to get out of bed for 2 days. Yeah. You understand me? And stuff like that, because I'm too depressed to get out of bed. Or there might be other issues I'm faced with. And so what happens here, that the church, if the church becomes a safe place for persons, then I think we can better address mental health issues. And how do we become a safe place? Look, from the pulpit, Jeremy, we need to let people know that mental illness is real and it's not. And let me tell
it's
you,
not demonic.
it's not.
That was going to be my next question. But
But by the way, you pick it straight out of my mouth too. It's not demonic. You know what I mean? And so medication, it's okay to take your medicine, and it's okay to go see a therapist and have them help you to work through those issues. And the church can be a launching pad for those things by just simply acknowledging it. I read an article a couple of weeks ago. Well, not a couple of weeks ago. Actually, it was 2019. And this lady in...
You read the last year, a couple of weeks ago.
This lady, I think it is in Kentucky. She's a professor and she is a psychologist. Her husband committed suicide.
Oh, wow.
And she went to her priest and she wrote in the article that her priest was not able to help her. The priest actually run from the issue. And so now what happened? The judgment came into play. Well, is that person going to heaven or this person not going to heaven because of suicide? And so she was very taken aback that the church, she wanted now somebody to understand her issues, to understand what she was going through, and she didn't get it at the church. But she became an advocate for pastors, and she called pastors first responders. And her thing is that as a pastor, before somebody go to a therapist, they might come to you. And so you need now to understand just some basics so that you can make that referral. And so I think that's where the church needs to begin to do, acknowledge it is real. People are suffering. Some of us pastors, a couple of years ago, a young pastor, 40 years old in California, blew his brain out in his driveway after preach about depression. After preach about depression, he went home and killed himself. And I read the sermon and yes. And he went home and blew his brain out. And there are other pastors who have committed suicide. I think it's it's Oklahoma, one of those areas also, depressed. And if you read from, I think it's Lifeway, a banner group, and in terms of pastors, every pastor, so much percentage of pastors know another pastor who is depressed. And pastors know of members who are depressed, but the matter is not addressed. And I think until pastors become honest and begin to talk about their own state and acknowledge, yes, I know people who are, and therefore, look, we have to provide that safe environment where people can talk about it.
Or yes, I am.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
I agree. Go ahead, Jeremy.
You said something there, and I just want to share this story. A couple years ago, a lady walked into my office and shared some stuff with me. And when you spoke about it's not good for pastors to have certain kinds of information, and then I went home after that and opened the lectionary and started to prepare the sermon for the following Sunday. And when the text came up, everything that lady was talking about was in that text some way or the other.
Wow.
And I said, I can't preach this text this Sunday because had I preached that text that Sunday, the lady would have felt that I am taking all her issues, airing her issues out in public, and using the same issues, using the Bible now and the pulpit to throw words at her. Sometimes it's good not to know. Sometimes it's good to know. It takes a certain kind of pastoral skill and acumen to tiptoe around those issues in such a way that thing is not. And it's not that you're running from the issue. It's not that you're preaching to make people comfortable. But sometimes the pastor in you needs to know that now is not the time for me to address this because too many issues are at work in the congregation or in people's lives in the congregation that's still too raw and you can't deal with it now.
Yeah.
Let me just jump in here quickly, because I know that earlier when Tanya asked about the call business and you mentioned persons journeying with you, I think it applies here too. That as pastor, sometimes you have to journey with persons. And I'll give an example. Again, serving in the army, a soldier come and say to me, hey, chaplain, this is how I'm feeling, blah, 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 blah. And I understand, hey, this person is suicidal. Another soldier might report him. My job is not to sit and talk him out of suicide. There are resources. I need to journey with him and talk to him about getting help and go with him to that place where he can get the necessary help. So it's not for me to know all the issues, but it's for me to travel with him into that pain, to that place where he can find help.
Yeah. And I think we have to understand that also pastors, they are human too, like what you guys been saying here. Of course, you would have to know your limit, but I think we all expect them to have, or you guys have all the answers. When in fact, we're all navigating this thing called life, still trying to figure and still have our own issues as well. So sometimes us as members or even people in society, it's just important for us. And it's a lesson I had to learn to that, these pastors, they're just like me. They just may have that title or have certain skills, but just like me. But I want to shift a little bit, then we'll wrap up. More about culture. And this is for Jeremy as well. And Mr. Glad you can join in too. Carnival in the Caribbean, right? It's our culture, it's our tradition. I remember, I'm not going to call the person's name, but I remember back in the day at Sunday school, we were talking about something as it relates to carnival. And at the time, my Sunday school teacher, he was like, he's a pastor now too. He was like, oh, you shouldn't go to carnival. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. And I was like, but it's part of our culture. Obviously, we know this. We know certain things have changed compared to way back when to now. But I'm like, it's part of our culture. If I want to go and play mass, why is that an issue? If I want to go to an event, why, as a young person in the church or a Christian, why can't I participate when in fact, it's part of our culture? And then a few years ago, I don't know because my memory is not great, but I remember seeing Jeremy. It might have been 2019, could have been before, I don't know. But I remember seeing Reverend Jeremy here judging a steel pan competition, and I'm going to tell you, I was so happy. I'm not going to even lie because obviously you're musically there. That's your forte in a sense. So to hear your opinion, that was one thing. But I'm just curious to know if one, you got any backlash for doing that, and two, what do you say to many of us? We want to be in our culture as far as carnival, playing mass, doing whatever, but we still feel, because I used to feel the type of way, oh, you come home for carnival? Yes, I did. What's the problem? So how can we, I guess, differentiate? Okay, you can be a Christian, but you can still participate in carnival because again, it's part of your culture in the Caribbean. So, yes, Jeremy, you can go first, and we have Mr. Gregory.
Okay. So, let's start with the I was a commentator. I didn't judge.
Yes. Commentator. Yes.
I was commentating for Panorama 2019, I think.
Okay.
For ABS. To be sure, when I got the call and asked to come, I cleared it with everybody. I called the chairman of PZ. I spoke to the bishop, so they were aware. And the next morning at church, I addressed it so that the members were not, because they saw it and I didn't want it. Some saw it, some didn't, but I addressed it. And I said to them, it's no hidden fact that I'm a musician. And it's pan. The church has a pan side. So it's music, it's pan. I help to arrange the pan side at church. And it's also no question that some of our young people in the church played in some of those same pan sides that were on stage and will be playing here next Sunday. So we need to understand and begin to open our mind as to what it is. Now, to be sure, there are certain parts of culture that I cannot embrace. As a Christian, my convictions will not allow me to embrace, I call it simulated sex behavior in the streets. I can't embrace that. All right? The theology of the body is a different story and a whole other debate that we can have in terms of how we treat our bodies and what's not. That's a whole other debate that I think at some point impacts this debate. But I think that where culture and carnival and the Christian is concerned is that the Christian now has to be selective as to which elements of the culture they are going to participate and embrace. Is everything about carnival bad? No. it was Glenville Gregory who, the first pastor I heard quoting Calypso in the pulpit in a sermon was Glenville Gregory. And he don't know what he did to me because now I just quote them plenty. All of them. But the reality is, if you understand the role of Calypso in the life of the people, Calypso tells the people's story. And so the people's issues and the history of Calypso was addressing the issues of the poor people, of the masses, in a way that they could not do it in front of the masses. So they did it in song. That's the history of Calypso. And that's how Calypso was birthed. And so basically a lot of our Calypsonians are modern day prophets. So that's what the prophets in scripture did. They addressed the issues of the day in a way that the people could understand. So there are certain parts of the culture I will not embrace, but I cannot honestly broad brush the whole of Carnival and say that the whole of Carnival is bad. Because there are parts of it. Certainly, I think that if we want to celebrate culture, I think that our Carnival committees need to do a better job at bringing in and maintaining elements of our historical culture, the old-time ways, the old-time dance, so that those things are not lost in the celebration of who we are. Because Carnival is really a celebration of our freedom, and especially in Antigua, it's a celebration of emancipation and freedom from slavery. So there are certain, to my mind, the Carnival committees need to do a better job at bringing out the historical context of what our culture is,
I agree.
to keep the culture alive and not make it a whole bunch of partying and song and dance. Because truly, what we are doing in Carnival now, especially in Antigua, is not what Carnival should have been. What we are doing is following the Trinidad model. And the Trinidad model of Carnival is different. Because Carnival in Trinidad is a different context of celebrating flesh and celebrating what's not before the lockdown of Lent. And Carnival in Trinidad Carnival in Trinidad comes out of a very French, very Spanish approach. Carnival for the rest of us is really the celebration of freedom from slavery. And I think we need
emancipation.
emancipation. And emancipation. And I think we need to begin to talk about that side of Carnival rather than us just broad brushing the whole thing. Because there are parts of our Carnival that is wholesome. I like the Calypsos. We just go Calypso show. And I like the pad. I'm not going to go to Soca Mana. I'm not going to do it. Because for one, I don't like the lyrics. And part of your content, you have to listen. I like to dance, but I'm not going to dance to everything because I don't agree with everything that the song is talking about. So at some point, you have to hear. You have to hear what's going on and be able to make a conscious decision as to what does this line up with how you understand yourself as a Christian and how you understand yourself as how God would have you to be. That's the reason why it's my last point. I don't subscribe to carnival camps. These modern day things where these churches are now having carnival camp, you pick up the people and them and you carry them in some bushback because you want to get them away from carnival. I don't subscribe to that. I subscribe to teaching our people to live. You can't run away from the world. And so when you want to pick you up and run to the back of bush because we don't want it to be in carnival, but you're on your phone and at camp, you can tell me everything that's happening, who win this show, who win that show. You might as well let them go. Teach the people and them how to live, be in the world, but not of the world. So that's just my... That's my answer. I didn't get much backlash really, because like I said, I spoke to my congregation about it, and one or two people had enough gumption to come to me outside of Grace Hill where I was serving at the time. So I read me say on TV, man, what happened? And we had the conversation. We had the conversation, and then we were good after that. So that's about it.
Yeah, I support everything that you have just mentioned. The thing about it is that there are elements of our culture that really, is not wholesome. No. And specifically when we're talking about carnival, I support you 110%. That meanings need to come into play. What are we celebrating? And how does this whole issue of carnival and faith, match up, so to speak? Was Christ against culture? I've always said to people that, so they call him a wine bibber. You know what I mean? And he mixed with publicans and sinners. You get the impression that Jesus participated. However, at the same time, Jesus knew exactly his mission. And so therefore, he never deviated from his mission. So even when he participated in celebrations, the way that some people might say that I'm taking this way off, but the wedding at Cana, you understand? He was there, he was celebrating, but at the same time, a revelation took place because of what happened through him. And so my feeling is that whatever cultural activities that we participate in, that we must always maintaining our faith and seek, and how do we understand our faith, our witness through what's happening around here. This is why I always say that I said earlier, rather, that the gospel has to be contextualized. Another thing that I would say very briefly, a passage that I always like and always rest with it. You remember Paul on Mars Hill?
Yeah.
And he went to the synagogue, and then when he went out and he walked, he realized, oh man, all these structures and all these things, it was all part of their religious culture, their religious life. And rather than knocking it down, Paul basically engaged in meaningful conversation. I love that. Because he could have said that wrong, that wrong, that wrong, that wrong. And then that almost sound like a soca song, that wrong, that wrong, that wrong. You know? but no, he did not engage in that way. He rather said to them, hey, look, fine, this is what you're doing, but this is what I believe. And they engage meaningfully. And I think that what needs to happen so that we can recapture what we have lost as it relates to the culture. Well, Tanya, you know, because you guys travel together and you all go to Antigua and you play mass and you enjoy yourself. You understand? Yeah. And I have no condemnation on that. What for me is important is how exactly are you presenting yourself? Are you, based on your activities, if your pastor, if your daddy should walk by, would he be ashamed to own you?
No, and I think for me, that's like, you know, even playing mass, because I didn't play mass growing up, you know, back in the day. I only started playing mass after high school. Well, you know, you still have to conduct yourself in a way. Because one, I'm thinking, okay, you know, you have to represent your family, because, you know, you're always told when you go outside, you're representing your family. And then two, because, you know, we grew up in the church, so you didn't want to be out here acting all, then again, it's not even me anyways, me acting all crazy, getting drunk and stuff. That's not necessarily who I am. But, you know, for me, when I'm doing these things, I'm thinking, well, oh, you know, it's part of the culture, let me participate. Of course, that's not everybody's thought or intention either. But again, you know, it's just, I feel like it just comes down to how we conduct ourselves out here in these streets, as the young people would say. But as we wrap up, of course, like, I can't not talk about.
Let me just say one more thing. I would simply say this: whatever we do, never forget whose we are.
That's it.
Yes, that's true. That's so true. All the facts. That is so true. But as we get ready to wrap up, you know, I can't talk about the pandemic. So any advice as we're about to go? Many of us, we've lost jobs. People are struggling. There's just so many things that's happening since last year, March, when the world went haywire. So any advice, especially people who feel that their faith has been tested? Any advice on how to hold on and, you know, keep pushing through during this time? Because, you know, we're hopefully getting out of this at some point in time. But many people, I'm pretty sure, like I've heard, the depression rate has been up. You know, so many things because of just this COVID-19 pandemic. So any advice to those out here, whether you're a Christian or not, or you may be considering deepening your faith or trying to find something of higher power to believe in? Any advice you guys have as we get ready to wrap up?
I guess today I've been the king of one-word answers with long explanations. Going back to the word I used earlier, we have to be honest with ourselves. Let me use another word. To show that I went to school. Be truthful to ourselves. Okay? And I say that to say that one of the things I think the pandemic has forced us to do is to confront our real selves. See, before the pandemic, we were busy doing a whole heap of things. Going here, work kept you busy. This. You were forced to sit down now, stay home. And what that has done is forced you to now see your real self and confront your real self. And I think if I had to say to persons how you can deal with this pandemic, how to deal with it, is to sit back and to be honest and truthful to yourself. Hey, I am broke. Hey, I'm hungry. Hey, I'm lonely. I don't like to stay at home. And find an avenue. Call a friend. Rediscover yourself. Get a hobby. Plan. One of the things I have done during this pandemic is I don't plant. My fingers don't green. I like Glenville's stuff. He plants well, and I just watch those things and say, boy, they're pretty. But one of the things I have done is, strange enough, during this pandemic, I've returned to reading for leisure. I've returned to playing music for leisure in terms of even trying to teach myself some stuff. I bought, fortunately, for Christmas, I gave myself a bicycle. I bought a pedal bike. And for the first time in Humpty Dumpty years, I get on my bicycle and sometimes I go riding 10 miles a day in the afternoons once time will allow it and come back. Right? Easter mashed up the cycle, but I need to get back to it. But the fact of the matter is, you need to be honest. There was a time during this pandemic where when the pandemic started, my wife and I, we had just moved to St. Croix. As much as my sisters are here, my mother was here for a long time. But we couldn't see each other because of the pandemic. But we got fed up one day. Literally, and my wife likes to stay at home. She don't like to leave the house. But one day she got up and she said, I'm tired of being in this house. And so you know what we did? We got in the car, I picked up my mother, and we drove from one end of St. Croix, went all the way up the east side, places that I hadn't seen since I was a child. Turned back around and came all the way down here to the west side. And we spent the whole day on the road, just driving and chatting. We stopped someplace and just kept going because it was driving us crazy. And at some point, you have to admit that I'm not dealing with this well, and I need to address it. Let me go do something. And I think where the pandemic is concerned, that's what we have to do. And I think the other side of it is that we have to begin to embrace what is now being dubbed famously as the new normal. The reality of it is life will not go back to what it used to be.
To normal, yeah.
Whatever normal was, it was past tense. It's not going to go back. And I even think some employers need to admit the fact that if we could have kept people home and they could have worked from home and they didn't have to come in, when all this is over, if they want to work from home, let them work from home.
Yes, I agree.
Let them work from home. I know for sure, I for sure will not be having many face-to-face meetings at church because I've learned how to do Zoom meetings very well. And the Zoom meetings have worked very well. So for those who can Zoom, we will be Zooming. And that even help. And that helped for the church because some people couldn't see each other. So at least by Zoom, you turn on your camera, everybody laugh, you chat. I've had Zoom birthday parties, Zoom anniversary days, Zoom that. I preached from Zoom. That was a whole different experience. But you preach from Zoom. But I just think that we need to understand that there's a new normal that's coming. And we have to be prepared to embrace that. Life, as it were, will not be the same. And we need to embrace it. And my other word is go get the vaccine. The only how we can get out of this is to get the vaccine. Go get it.
I agree. What about you, Mr. Gregory?
Yeah, just again, I endorse what my brother just mentioned, and I'll just simply add that for people who who tune in, who listen to us today, one of the things that I would say is that the pandemic says to us that we cannot continue to drift from moment to moment. We cannot continue to create life on the spot, because I think that's what happened before. Sometimes we just drift into the next thing, create life on the spot. The pandemic, to my mind, says that we have to be more intentional about living.
Yes.
And so I want to say to persons, look, yes, you have to have a purposeful flow, if you allow me that. But you have to do that. You have to make it a situation whereby whatever you're doing, that it's planned, that it is intentional, that it is something that you have a goal towards, so to speak, rather than just, hey, I'm just drifting into it. And if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And it's not a matter that you're trying to control things and control situation and control outcome. That's not it. But we have to recover the meanings to our lives. And that's what I would say. And it's not about money. It's not about having all the resources. It's about having yourself, knowing who you are and the people around you, and being able to utilize just what you have. Of course, the disparities in terms of the healthcare system and in terms of the economic system showed up with a vengeance. That is something we cannot deny. But Brother Jeremy mentioned something. With the pandemic, creativity. So we need to be intentional about being creative. Something I read, and I don't remember where I read it, but it's this gentleman who was laid off during the pandemic and couldn't figure out what to do. And so therefore, because he used to cook before, then he started to cook.
Wow.
And so as he cooked, and it's like, you pay me what you can. And he would buy whatever he could, and then he started to feed persons. But then he started to pay himself and started to employ people. And this was all through the pandemic.
Wow.
Because what happened is that he became intentional, one, about taking care of himself in terms of finding something to do so he could support his family. He became intentional about supporting his community because there are persons in his community who could not eat, who could not afford. And so whatever they could have afforded, he just basically let them pay that. And the next thing you know, he was intentional about employing people, because what he was doing as something just to support himself until the pandemic passed became a source of employment.
Wow.
For other people. So the purpose flow, I love that, is important.
I agree.
Just to piggyback again, I think too, I'm not trying to go down the church road on this one here, but restructuring. I think the pandemic has provided us an opportunity to restructure, reorganize, reorient life, reprioritize what is important. What are some of the things that we thought we couldn't live without, that we've been forced to live without, and we have lived just fine?
Yeah, I agree.
What are some of the ways that we can reorganize ourselves, reorganize our finances, reorganize our living, our time, to use our time more efficiently and effectively, more purposefully, to create the word, so that, and I think if we emerge out of this pandemic having not done those things, we would have wasted and missed a prime opportunity for growth and development.
I absolutely agree. And I'm just sitting here and all listening to you two. I wish we could go on forever and ever, but I think, there's so many other topics I wanted to talk about, but we'll do that in another episode. Hopefully you guys would come back. But I really honestly want to thank you guys. This is a conversation that I've been wanting to have. I have a little book where I write down, potential guests or dream guests. And I think I told Jeremy, you've been on my list because I know you're going to bring it, Mr. Gregory. I know you're going to bring it. And you guys did. And I feel like, it's a very, very powerful episode, and it's a conversation that needed to happen, especially for my audience. So thank you guys for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down here with me on a Saturday and record this episode. And of course, it's going to be really good. That's all I can say. And yeah, hopefully I can have you guys back on sometime in the near future. So thank you.
Anytime.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. For me, I really enjoyed this discussion. And just to see you guys, it's a joy. So thank you.
Thank you. All right.
It's a joy to share a panel with you too, Brother Gregory. And Tanya, we remain ever proud of you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.